In the United States today, the topic of immigration enforcement is heated, emotional, and often misunderstood. When people talk about immigration going door to door, many imagine agents breaking through doors, sweeping neighborhoods, or rounding up entire groups of people. But what actually happens today, and how does it compare to what has happened throughout history? From targeted ICE home visits in the 2020s, to mass raids in the 1930s and 1950s, to document checks in wartime Europe, the history of door-to-door immigration enforcement tells a deeper story. A story of fear, of power, of law, and of how nations respond to crisis. Today, we're breaking it all down. Let's start with what happens right now in the United States. Modern door-to-door immigration enforcement usually involves ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, conducting what they call at-large operations. These are targeted actions focused on a specific person, not an entire neighborhood. Agents knock on a door, identify themselves, and ask for the person they're looking for. But here's the important part. They cannot legally enter a home without a judicial warrant or permission from someone inside. They may carry administrative warrants, but these do not allow forced entry. In other words, despite what movies and social media portray, ICE cannot legally break down a door simply because they want to check someone's papers. Modern enforcement is far more limited, at least on paper, than what we've seen in other eras. To understand the full picture, we need to turn back the clock to the 1930s. During the Great Depression, more than 1 million people of Mexican descent, many of them American citizens, were pushed out of the country through raids, intimidation, and door-to-door roundups. There were no warrants, no due process, and often no distinction between citizens and non-citizens. Families were told to pack their belongings and get on trains bound for Mexico, even if they had lived in the United States their entire lives. Compared to today, this was a wide, sweeping campaign driven by economic fear, political pressure, and racial prejudice. It remains one of the darkest chapters in American immigration history. Fast forward to the 1950s. In 1954, the U.S. government launched Operation Wetback, a massive immigration crackdown involving local police, border patrol, and the military. Officers went door to door, block by block, rounding up anyone who looked Mexican, again, often without verifying citizenship. Roadblocks were set up. Neighborhoods were swept. Tens of thousands were placed on buses and ships and transported directly to Mexico. This was not a targeted operation. It was a mass roundup. And the lack of legal safeguards led to widespread abuse. In comparison, modern U.S. enforcement, while still controversial, is smaller, more individualized, and bound by much stricter laws. The idea of door-to-door immigration checks is not exclusive to the United States. In parts of Europe during the 1930s and 1940s, governments implemented papers, pleas systems, where identity documents had to be shown on demand. Police could knock on doors without warrants. Entire communities were targeted, especially Jews, Roma, and immigrants. These practices were used not for immigration enforcement alone, but for racial, political, and ideological control. Compared to those eras, the modern U.S. system looks completely different. There is no national ID requirement. There are legal limits on entry. And there is no law allowing blanket door-to-door sweeps based on ethnicity. During the Cold War, another form of home visits emerged in the United States, this time from the FBI. Agents visited homes based on political suspicion, not immigration status. Naturalized citizens and immigrants were questioned about their beliefs, their friends, and their loyalties. This wasn't deportation-focused, but it created an atmosphere of fear similar to that seen in earlier immigration sweeps. The key difference? Modern immigration enforcement in the U.S. does not target political ideology. Its scope is limited to immigration violations, criminal issues, and administrative matters. One of the most haunting historical comparisons is the treatment of Japanese Americans during World War II. Before the mass internment, FBI agents and local authorities conducted door-to-door arrests of community leaders, without warrants. Homes were searched. Property was seized. And eventually, over 120,000 Japanese Americans, 2/3 of them U.S. citizens, were forcibly relocated to camps. This period shows how, under wartime pressure, governments can suspend normal legal protections. Today, no such mass internment policy exists, and modern legal standards would not allow it. But the memory of these events still shapes how communities view government authority. Despite major differences, there are clear parallels across time. Fear within immigrant communities. Families hiding or avoiding contact with authorities. Confusion about legal rights. The emotional toll of uncertain status. Whenever the government goes door to door, regardless of era, it creates an atmosphere of anxiety. But the differences matter just as much as the similarities. Today's U.S. immigration enforcement is more restrained legally, more focused on specific individuals, far smaller in scale, subject to judicial oversight, monitored by advocacy groups and media. In other words, while fear still exists, the legal tools available to stop abuses are far stronger than they were in the past. Door-to-door immigration enforcement has taken many forms throughout history, from targeted operations to mass ethnic sweeps. Today's policies may be controversial, but they are not unprecedented. What matters is learning from history, so we avoid repeating its darkest chapters. Understanding the past helps us see the present more clearly, and guides us toward a fairer, more humane future.